Hello and welcome back to Escaping Kerbin. Today we are going to make a huge step forward and achieve a great milestone in our space agency's history, and we are finally going to escape Kerbin. We're just going to be peeking outside the sphere of influence. Nothing too intense just yet, but just getting our feet wet with the process and practicing the maneuvers that we're going to need to be able to do. So first off, we're going to go into the observatory and check out all that we can see from there. This is where we're going to be looking at pretty soon to unlock different planets to eventually go to, but it is still searching the skies, so there's nothing we can do now except send up a telescope to hopefully help it along the way. So I'm going to be just looking through here real fast to see where best to spend my science points. And what I go for ends up being, because it has communication dishes and a new probe core. So that is kind of what I'm going to be focusing on as far as grabbing our science. But this probe that we're going to send out is going to be a two-parter. It's going to have the telescope that's necessary for research bodies mod to discover planets, as well as a bunch of high-powered communication dishes to hopefully act as a relay while it's out there in the orbit of the sun. So yeah, so as you see here, I go ahead and take the precision engineering node, and then I go ahead and start off with the new probe core. Nothing too fancy, it's just a hexagon. And I start out with the telescope and enough batteries to hopefully hold it off. I'm looking here and I don't have ampere anymore, so I was hoping to utilize that to test and see if I will have enough electricity, but of course I did not have it installed, so I couldn't. Now these dishes are nice, but they're big, and I don't like parts clipping into each other, especially not after the situation that we're dealing with in POV. So what I do here is, in order to make sure that my solar panels don't get in the way of my communication panels, and making sure my communication panels don't get in the way of the satellite itself. So we add a little robotics there. And now we're pointing all of our communication dishes to the appropriate places. But rather than Minmus and the Mun, they're going to be pointed at Duna and Eve. So now I just need a little bit more room for my communication dishes to not clip into each other. Then I want to just adjust how they sit there. And there we go. So now just setting up my action groups. And then I went ahead and tested it to make sure that the action group did in fact deploy everything, and it did. It didn't activate the communication dishes, so that's why I had to add that right there. But now we are ready to put in the crewed capsule, what's actually going to be controlling this thing. Sadly enough, I didn't have a decent enough communication network set in place, so when we do leave command of the satellite to itself, we find out that it does not have communication dishes to send back the information. So that does kind of suck, just knowing that going into the beginning of the process, that this satellite won't quite work until we have ourselves a better communication network. So now I'm just testing to make sure that my command capsule has enough parachutes to bring it down safely. And our usual lifting rocket, only this time we decide to see how it does with some solid rocket boosters, some SRBs. Quite a set of big ones too. The SRBs has enough thrust to weight that we don't actually need to launch our center stage at the same time. We can just let it fire once the SRBs have depleted their fuel. Alright, so now we got our fairing on the top. And we got some Separatrons on the lower boosters with some explosives. I tried to add a light there to see if I could stage the light to turn on with the separation of the lower boosters. Kind of have like a flashing red light as it goes back, but couldn't figure out how to do that. So. And then here at the last moment, I'm deciding to put some spare parts, so that way if one of our parts fail, we can hopefully repair it. We do have a pilot and engineer on board, so the engineer is there ready to do any kind of fixes, because we don't want to leave these Kerbals in orbit of the Sol, orbit of the Sun. So, because creating a rescue mission out there becomes significantly more difficult. We're gonna just time warp or fast forward just a little. It's a fairly standard ascent. Only difference is that we're using SRBs this time, but as you can see, they are working quite according to plan. Very nominally. We are getting a little bit of a heat gauge on them, but they are soon to be separated, so we're not too concerned. And there we are, the clean separation. And we're just gonna tilt the craft down a little bit. Wasn't the most efficient gravity turn, but it worked out. And just coasting up. Pretty usual as takeoffs go. Just watching our apoapsis, and then finally once it hits the appropriate height, it's about 150 kilometers. We wait until we break through the atmosphere, and then we plot in our maneuver. It's best to plot in the maneuver once you're already in the low Kerbin orbit, because it will change. If you plot it when you're in the atmosphere, it will be preparing to do all those maneuvers with less ISP. Ah, look at that. That's gorgeous. I love when a good set of command or action groups come together and deploy everything seamlessly. And just making sure that all my communication dishes are turned to the right places, and then we're lowering the gimbaling on our engine so that way it doesn't spin around wildly as we're trying to execute the maneuver. And we point ourselves to our maneuver node. Make sure that we're all lined up. And then when it's the appropriate time, we time warp our way forward, and our node executes. It's fun to see the solar panels kind of lean back in a way through due to the force. I started to think about it and started to get worried that I should have waited until after the circularization to deploy them because they could have ripped off here, but thankfully no damage was done. Even though I turned down the gimbal limit, it is still spinning pretty wildly. And there we go. Attack explosives takes care of that. No space trash for us. Even though it would have come back down to the atmosphere on its own, it would have burnt up and taken care of itself, but better safe than sorry. Because sometimes we end up making ourselves an accidental SSTO, and our lower stage is all we need to get to orbit and beyond. So if that were the case, then we would have been very grateful for those explosives. So now here I am. I'm looking to see our known solar system. It's just Kerbin and its moons. But yeah, so I look at the appropriate size that I want to burn at. I want to burn slightly inwards, so we're between Kerbin and the sun. And now I plot in half my maneuver here, and we're just going to push out our apoapsis a bit, but without leaving Kerbin. The Poodle engine isn't very fast to make its maneuvers. It has quite a low thrust to weight ratio. It is very efficient and it is size appropriate, but it's not the greatest. And so in order to better perform this maneuver, we decided to split it into 2 burns. And we're just going to skip ahead just a little bit. And the burn is going to speed up a little bit because the faster you go, the farther out you end up going. And there we go. It shuts off automatically because we had the burn controlled by the flight computer. So now we're just plotting at our periapsis one more time. Just another burn to take us outside of the sphere of influence. We've got plenty of delta V at the time, for the time being. So once again, I time warp my way to the maneuver, and I let flight computer take control. Much shorter burn this time, since we're already extended so far out. We have quite a bit of speed going already. There we are. We are now exiting the sphere of influence, and we're going to be as far out as we've ever been in this series or any of the others. And we got to do this very safely, but we're going to time warp our way out of the sphere of influence and peek our heads into the sphere of influence of the sun. And just like that, we are now in orbit. Slightly away from Kerbin, going roughly the same speed. But if we were to leave these Kerbals out here, pretty soon they will be pulling away from their homelands altogether. See, I tried to transmit some of the science, but apparently our communication dishes were not enough. So we go ahead and activate our telescope, and that should be searching. And hopefully that will speed up the time it takes us to locate the different planets. So now, without anything else to do, all of our science done, we separate the top half, the probe, the relay dish, whichever you want to call it. And we separate ourselves enough that when we turn around, we won't destroy our equipment. Now, what I end up doing is forgetting everything I know about orbital mechanics, and I think, oh, all I need to do is flip around retrograde, and then that will bring me back to Kerbin. But it takes me a couple seconds, and then I realize, oh wait, no, that's just going to bring me closer to the sun. I don't want to get closer to the sun. So I decided to plot my maneuver instead. You know, that's what we always do. I don't know why I thought I could just eyeball it. So yeah, see, as I'm pulling retrograde, it's not getting me anywhere. What I need to do is point orbital out and just kind of get myself back into the pathway within the trajectory of Kerbin. So as you see here, I made my counter, and I'm just going to bring down my periapsis until we are almost in the atmosphere, just barely outside, because I have a feeling that the delta V required to get ourselves back down to the planet is going to be too high, so we're going to need to do some serious aero braking. Point myself at my maneuver, and I time warp to it. And you can see I'm right there. Everything's very tense. My heart was racing during this time because I did not want to lose these Kerbals. Or the science. The science is good. Science is stuff that we've never had, but more importantly, these Kerbals needed to come back and share the stories of what they've seen. So I kill the maneuver and just let myself bring it in as close as possible. Not the greatest idea. I really need to be diligent with my delta V. But I figured if I could just bring myself within the atmosphere, I can start aero braking, and we will eventually come home. I could just have this thing orbit Kerbin and then come back and send up a rescue mission, but I want to get these Kerbals back now. So I play around with my maneuver and just try to utilize all the delta V that I can, just get every last drop of fuel and make it worthwhile. And even with that, I'm still not set to come in on the first round. I still have a fairly high apoapsis. But we'll see how that handles up to the re-entry. So now I got my craft lined up right on its maneuver node, and then I go ahead and hit time warp to maneuver. I'm passing by Mintz, passing under the Mun. And this is going to be the last of our fuel, so if this doesn't work out, there's nothing really we can do save exit the craft and push with our RCS. And then we fire. And just like that, we are now captured back into the orbit of Kerbin. All we gotta do is lower our apoapsis enough that we don't have to aero brake several times. And lower our periapsis while still keeping it high enough that we don't come rocketing in at too steep of an angle. We want to hit 42 kilometers above the surface. We use 42 delta V to send our craft back home. The last of it. The last of all of our fuel. So this has been unofficially nicknamed Mission 42. Because that's all that stands between us and disaster. Go ahead and jettison our engine. We are now at the mercy of the aero brake. So we close our solar panels and we line ourselves up. And we're going to be coming in on the dark side of the planet, so we turn on whatever lights we can. And we get ready. And already the heat effect takes over the craft. And we're starting to freeze up a little bit. Never a good sign. Always troubling, because when we freeze up, sometimes that results in explosions. It's the computer calculating. Yep, as you see right here. It's the computer calculating what the explosion will be. And so when it freezes up like that, my heart drops. Now I'm speeding up the footage quite a bit because it was a long re-entry. I was forced to use the spin technique because a little bit earlier we kind of flew right by it, but there were some heat gauges appearing and we just needed to find a way of dissipating it. So now I'm speeding up the footage quite significantly to just kind of get ourselves back through the atmosphere. And I'm not time warping or physics warping this at all. I was so worried about physics warping my way into destruction that I just sat with it and came down in real time. But now we are in the 20,000s and the heat is slowly dissipating. And then by the time we hit 21,000, we will be free and clear. We are coming home. And our parachutes, according to stage recovery, should be enough to land us safely. The darkest part of the planet is where we're landing right now. The Kerbals are excited. They have a crew report to give. They didn't take an EVA report during the time. They could have gotten one of those as well, but everyone was so focused on just getting them back home safely that exiting the craft just seemed like a ludicrous idea. Wasteful. Unnecessary. As you see, our parachutes go ahead and deploy. And then they pop open, bringing us to a safe 5-point-something meters per second descent. And we safely touch down in the water. This can be considered a mission success. We did it, everybody. We escaped Kerbin. Now, true, we haven't made it to a planet yet, but that's going to be on the docket for the next set of missions. But anyways, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more escaping Kerbin. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.